Hello, everybody, and welcome to A Breath of Fresh Sports Episode 2. I am your host, John Piszczek. I have a couple topics today involving Dak Prescott's contract extension, the NBA's likely playoff format for this postseason, and the question surrounding will Kevin Durant return to action this postseason if his Achilles was fully healthy. And now, obviously, a lot of people are affected financially right now due to Corona. I happen to be one of them. The only reason I actually have time to do this little show on Thursdays is because, obviously, I'm out of school at the moment, and I got fired from work. So that's pretty fun. And, obviously, us average Joes aren't really the only people affected by this, or at least the only people who have had some financial problems lately. And in the sports world, the one I think of is Dak Prescott, the current Dallas Cowboys quarterback. And people might be thinking, he's the quarterback of the most well-known team in the NFL, possibly one of the top in all of sports, maybe up there with the Yankees and the Celtics, maybe the Lakers. But for quite a while now, Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys have been struggling to really gain traction on a possible contract extension. Prescott has started all 4 years since coming into the league. He has actually not missed a start. Very durable player coming out of Mississippi. And him and Jerry Jones have really been struggling to really find a number in the middle that would help both sides. And this is a drama that we as NFL fans have gotten to keep up with for quite a while now. And it's really put Dallas in an interesting situation because as of late, we have seen teams not hesitate whatsoever to pay their starting quarterbacks, whether those guys are franchise caliber players or not. And the reason I say that is because we've seen guys like Derek Carr get these massive contract extensions when, no offense to Derek Carr, I don't think anyone would rank him as an elite quarterback. And that's no offense to Derek Carr. He's just not that guy. He has one postseason appearance throughout his entire career. And even then, he was injured and didn't actually make it to that postseason start against the Texans. So, was he really worth that money? I personally don't think so, but it is what it is. So, it kind of raises the question, should Dak Prescott be receiving that kind of contract? And it's kind of difficult to evaluate Dak because, what in particular is he great at? And the answer is nothing. And I'm not saying that he's a bad football player. But when you think of, these rocket arm quarterbacks who can launch it 50, 60 yards at the flick of a wrist, you think of Aaron Rodgers, you think of Patrick Mahomes, you think of Josh Allen. You don't think of Dak Prescott. When you think of these Michael Vick type, almost Madden video game style quarterbacks, the top guy you obviously think of, Lamar Jackson. You think of Josh Allen to an extent because of his ability to break tackles, and before his injury, Cam Newton. I wouldn't put Dak in that category. It's just crazy that despite being a pretty subpar average player, Dak Prescott is making such egregious contract commands, which I understand it to an extent. He's only started 4 years in the NFL. Despite that, he has 2 playoff appearances under his belt. Won a playoff game against the Seattle Seahawks. Obviously they're a good team, successful franchise. Russell Wilson, Pete Carroll, they've got a lot going for them. So it really is, he's hard to evaluate because you look at this past season, Dallas had a very stacked roster. DeMarcus Lawrence, Byron Jones, Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, Ezekiel Elliott, the list just goes on. And they were a 500 team, finished the year 8-8, missed the postseason, in a relatively weak and subpar NFC East. But with Dallas, I've stressed this enough, but it's a very difficult situation because they're kind of a middle of the pack team. If they were a team like Jacksonville or Arizona who had a quarterback demanding a massive contract extension, well, what's their incentive to keep him? We're going to keep you so we can go 6-10 or 7-9 again? It just wouldn't make sense. So if that was the case, you either trade him or you just let him walk outright. Then you have the teams like the Chiefs or the Bills, who very clearly are not going to let their quarterbacks walk in free agency. Patrick Mahomes is likely going to receive the biggest contract in NFL history. So that's not really the kind of thing we can compare Dak to, because obviously Patrick Mahomes has thrown 50 touchdowns during his first season as a starter, and Patrick Mahomes has a Super Bowl championship against a magnificent San Francisco defense led by Greg Sala, Nick Bosa and company. So it's kind of difficult because Dallas, despite all of their talent, has underachieved for the most part. During Dak's rookie year, they went 13-3, lost in the first round of the playoffs to the Packers. Second year, they missed the playoffs. 2018, they made the playoffs, went 1-1, beat Seattle before losing to the eventual NFC champion Rams. And then this past season, after starting the year, it was either 3-0 and 3-1. They missed the postseason completely, and that's really not an acceptable thing with an offense and overall roster as talented as theirs was. So I don't know where I'd necessarily put Dak on this chain of command with contracts, because there are going to be a lot of guys coming up. And as we know, whenever there's a new extension, the market gets completely reset. 5 years ago, if a quarterback was making $22 million a year, they were one of the highest paid, if not the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. If a quarterback's making $22 million a year now, it's nothing. You'd be a middle of the pack player if you were making $22 million a year salary as a quarterback. And with the roster as talented as Dallas is, you really can't afford to just throw a rookie or a random free agent in there and have your Super Bowl window just kind of depend on that, because the problem is Dallas is a very young team. They have a lot of guys who are either going to command a large contract in a very short period of time, or they've already gotten that large contract. Names like DeMarcus Lawrence, Leighton Vander Esch, Jalen Smith, Amari Cooper, all guys who have either received massive contracts or are in line for massive contracts. So that alone really does affect what you should do with Dak, because people don't realize how valuable those rookie contracts are. I mean, 1 second a guy's making $800,000 base salary, and at the blink of an eye, he's making $16 million. And that really is huge, because it really limits your ability to have, depth and things like that, just because we see year after year a team is very good, a lot of young pieces, then 1 or 2 big free agents decide to cash in, and just like that, you see pieces just leave and leave and leave. And that's really the story of a lot of NFL teams. And it really is a sad thing, and you would hate to see it happen with a roster as talented as the Cowboys. I mean, their top corner last season, Byron Jones, was one of the best rated corners in the NFL, and they didn't even think about keeping him in free agency because they were simply unable to. That's how bad their situation is right now. But can you really afford to let Dak walk and your entire Super Bowl window hinge on the shoulders of Andy Dalton or another potential guy they could trade for? And if they're going to trade for a guy, chances are he's not that great because he's on the trade block for a reason. So it really isn't. It's a very delicate situation, because I think this is something you'll see Baltimore deal with in the coming years, when guys like Hollywood Brown, Mark Andrews, and Lamar Jackson all need contract extensions. They're going to have to let some guys walk. And unfortunately, Dallas might fall victim to a situation like this, because a lot of their guys are young, and obviously youth means a lot in the NFL, but youth also means big contract extensions, because after that rookie deal, guys are looking to cash in. Guys like Dak, who as a 4th round pick did not make much in those first 4 years. Obviously, to the average civilian on the street, Dak is living large, but by NFL standards, he was in the lower percentile in terms of quarterback salaries. So personally speaking, would I pay Dak? No, but I would try to keep Dak around on the franchise or transition tag for at least this season, because I do believe he should get one opportunity to go for it this season with a new coach in Mike McCarthy, and obviously another year with offensive coordinator Kellen Moore. but I will commend the Cowboys because I do respect what they're doing, that they're not budging. Because quite frankly, I do think the quarterback contracts are getting a bit ridiculous just because a lot of guys who are pretty average are getting, the biggest contracts in NFL history, which is a little ridiculous to me. It seems like every time someone gets an extension, the market gets reset. And to sort of support Dak, he came from the 2016 draft class. Two other players from that class, Carson Wentz and Jared Goff, both have received massive contract extensions. Jared Goff's at the time made him the highest paid in NFL history simply based on guaranteed money. And you could argue that Dak is better than Jared Goff. So that is definitely something that will play into the negotiations. And in the end, I like Dak to, be set for life, especially with his backstory with his mother and stuff. But at the same time, I like the fact that the Cowboys are standing strong. And for the first time in years, a team is actually not caving into the quarterback's needs. So that's something I love to see. Now, to sort of transition into a different sport, the NBA announced today that they have essentially decided on a format for the postseason that, although it hasn't been passed yet, in all likelihood, it is almost confirmed that 75% of owners are going to vote on it and agree that this is the format they want, which would, of course, bring it into reality, to sort of say, because they will reach the minimum number of votes. And this format would include, the typical 8 seeds per conference. However, all the teams that were in the playoff race before this happened will be invited to Orlando for an 8-game regular season in order to try and earn their playoff spot. And by that, I mean the teams that have clinched, like the Lakers, Clippers, Rockets, Sixers, Bucks. You're going to see all of those teams in this. However, the teams who necessarily aren't in the playoffs but are actually fighting for it, like Portland, New Orleans, Phoenix, you're going to see those teams competing as well. And that's something I really love because about 1 or 2 months ago, before this all started, or rather when this was all starting, I saw a lot of people saying, oh, well, it's easy. We just have to jump right into the postseason. And if we do that, we're good. I didn't agree with that. I really didn't like that. And the reason I didn't like that was because I look at a team like New Orleans. And to sort of break this down for people who don't know, New Orleans was 10th or 11th in the West. However, they were only maybe 4 or 5 games out of the 8th seed. And the team who was currently sitting in the 8th seed, the Memphis Grizzlies, led by John Morant, had the toughest remaining schedule in terms of difficulty. So the 8th seed had the hardest remaining schedule. New Orleans, who's only a couple games back, had just gotten Zion Williamson back after his very long absence this season, and they were really starting to catch fire and work as a team. They had the easiest remaining schedule. So New Orleans was perfectly set up to make a late season run and jump Memphis for that final playoff spot, and we would have been robbed of that. So I really do like that they're giving these teams an opportunity. Another team I look at is the Portland Trail Blazers, another Western Conference team. They were actually in the Western Conference Finals last year. They were competing with Golden State for a trip to the finals, albeit they were swept. They were a great team last year. They beat Paul George's Oklahoma City Thunder and Nikola Jokic's Denver Nuggets, who have consistently been a good team the past couple of years. So, they really did have a very impressive postseason run. This season, the injury bug hit them a little, especially with their big men, Yusef Nurkic and Zach Collins. We all know about Nurkic. He essentially snapped his leg in half, and Zach Collins has been dealing with shoulder problems this season. And this whole quarantine thing really does affect the timeline, because when you hear season-ending injury, that's one thing. But then tack on an extra 3 months, suddenly it's a different ball game, because when we said season ending, we anticipated the season ending in June, not October. So it really does change fortune for a lot of teams, just because, Portland very unlucky all year long with injuries. Damian Lillard has been having a monster season. I would put him as an MVP candidate, maybe 3rd or 4th behind Giannis, LeBron, and possibly Anthony Davis. But if he was able to get those guys back with a little under 10 games to potentially work them in, there's no doubt, like I said, Memphis had the hardest remaining schedule in the entire league. Could an experienced veteran team like Portland potentially take that spot from them? Absolutely. Memphis's best player is a rookie, John Morant. Their second best player is a second-year player, Jaren Jackson Jr. So experience would definitely play a factor there because Portland knows what it takes to get to the postseason. They're coming off a season where they nearly got to the finals. They made it to the Eastern Conference Finals and just happened to match up against a very good Golden State Warriors team led by Kevin Durant. Was Klay Thompson? Never mind, Kevin Durant was not in that series, my bad. Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, DeMarcus Cousins, Draymond Green. Still a very talented roster. So there's no doubt that if they were able to get some of their guys healthy, they could potentially make a run in a very, I would say a shaky Western Conference rather, just because the Lakers haven't been in the postseason in years. I want to say since 2013. The Lakers have had a very long postseason drought. And with the Clippers, although on paper they're supposed to be a great team defensively, they've just had some really shaky games. Obviously, chemistry plays into this because Paul George missed a lot of games. Kawhi Leonard is like the king of load management, so their chemistry might be a problem, especially when you just traded for a guy like Marcus Morris at the deadline, who was jacking up a lot of threes with the Knicks, and now he has to sort of take a more reserved role as maybe the fourth or fifth scoring option. So there's a lot going on with them. You look at the Rockets, they traded Clint Capella, decided to go with small ball. A lot of question marks there. Can that actually work in the postseason? James Harden, what's going to happen with him? He consistently comes up short. Does that happen again? Who knows? So Portland and New Orleans are really in good spots to potentially make some noise this postseason if they were able to sneak in. And that's really why I do love this playoff format, because I do not think it was fair to just jump right into the postseason. I think we would have been robbed of some very good basketball and some very good late season pushes. So kudos to Adam Silver. Nice job. I don't particularly love him just because who loves sports commissioners, but he nailed this one. He hit it out of the park. And as I just referred to with the Portland Trail Blazers, for those teams who are, more injury prone this season, but still in the playoff hunt, this is a golden opportunity for them. And I look at the Brooklyn Nets. New Jersey Nets, rather. My bad. The Brooklyn Nets, who lost their top two players to injury this season. Kevin Durant tore his Achilles in Game 5 of the Toronto Finals last year. Freak accident. No one really could have anticipated that, although the medical staff was a little shaky before that game. So Kevin Durant, they signed him in the offseason. He has yet to play a game for them. Kyrie Irving had a really up and down season. He was injured. He dealt with a couple injuries actually, but somehow managed to sneak in a couple of 50-point games in there. Very inconsistent, but when he was on, he was doing magnificent. DeAndre Jordan is having one of his worst seasons as a pro statistically. And despite all this, they are still the 7th seed in the Eastern Conference. Despite all the injuries and being without their two best players, they are the 7th seed in the East. It's in all likelihood they're going to see the postseason. And that raises the question, because when you look at Kevin Durant's Achilles situation, there is not a person on this planet who will give you a consistent answer. And by that I mean, no matter who you ask, you get a different answer every time. You ask Kevin Durant, it's usually, I'm getting there, I think I can play. You ask his agent, Kevin's not going to play. You ask the Nets general manager, well, we'll see how things go. No one has yet to give a definitive answer on Kevin Durant's status for the potential postseason. So there's a lot of questions raised, because like I said, it's one thing when you're ruled out for the season, when you think the season is going to end 3 months earlier than when it does. So this whole quarantine thing really does change a lot of things in the NBA. Just like I said, these more injured teams that still remain in the playoff hunt, it's giving them a golden ticket for, if they're healthy, to potentially knock off a high seed. And on top of it all, they're going to get 8 games in the regular season to sort of build chemistry and find their rhythm as a team. And I really do love that for that simple reason. But should Kevin Durant play is the question that we're all thinking about. And personally speaking, if I was running the Brooklyn Nets, Kevin Durant would not be playing. And the reason I say that, we look at the NBA Finals last year. The big question through games 1 through 4, is Kevin Durant going to play? It was the talk of the finals. Before you know it, you look up Golden State is down 3-1. Game 5 in Toronto, they announced Kevin's good to go. He's going to play. And he was doing magnificent. He lit up the first half before, obviously, he went down, and that was all she wrote. His Achilles went out, and he was done for the series, as we all knew, and he has yet to play an organized basketball game in the NBA since then. And the reason I'm saying he shouldn't play is because look what happened the last time we asked ourselves this question. Ever since he had gotten hurt against Houston, we kept asking ourselves, is Kevin going to play? Is Kevin going to play? Is Kevin going to play? And then we maybe rushed him out there a bit prematurely because when he did play, less than 2 quarters in, his Achilles snapped and derailed his career big time. It changed the entire landscape of his free agency decision. And even the team he eventually signed with, the Brooklyn Nets, he has not played a game with them yet. So, from Kevin's standpoint, I don't think he should do it just because the last time we had this conversation, it didn't go well and it set him back a lot in his basketball life. An Achilles is a major injury, and when you're a player who is soon to enter their mid-30s, the last thing you want is 2 Achilles tears in 2 years. However, I will add that if there was one player who should return from injury, it should be Kevin Durant. And the reason I say that is, I'm going to use Derrick Rose as my example. Derrick Rose was a freak athlete, didn't have much of a jump shot, and a lot of his game relied on athleticism. So if he was going to come back with a lower leg or knee injury, well, that's just not smart because a lot of your athleticism as a player is in your legs. So that's not smart. You'd be setting him up for failure. Kevin Durant has an incredible jump shot. Like, for a 7-footer, Kevin Durant can shoot it like no one else. Multiple times in his career, he's been over 40% from 3. He has been in the 50-40-90 club. He's also had a couple of times where he just narrowly missed out. For those who don't know, 50-40-90 is 50% from the field, 40% from 3, 90% from the free throw line. He's an excellent shooter all around, which is why I do think if someone was going to come back, he'd be in a good position. Just because if he were to stand at the 3-point line, maybe serve as a decoy and knock down threes when he needs to, I don't think that the chances of re-injury are very high, although we've seen freak accidents. I do think he'd be in a nice position. And obviously, Kyrie Irving is another player I look at just because Kyrie had the season-ending shoulder surgery, but like I said, that was when we thought the season was going to be ending in June, not October. If Kyrie Irving was good to go, I'd be a lot more comfortable with trotting Kevin Durant out onto a basketball court just because there'd be someone to sort of take the load off. Maybe Kevin wouldn't get as much attention with Kyrie on the floor. But at the moment, it's a very risky league. We've seen guys like Derrick Rose were very healthy during their first couple seasons. And once that first injury happened, it was over. And especially entering his first season in Brooklyn, this is not the road you want to go down if you're Kevin Durant and Nets management. I can tell you that much. Especially when you were able to get Kyrie Irving and DeAndre Jordan with him, chances are you're going to want all 3 of those guys on the court at some point. You should wait until they're fully healthy to do so, or else you're going to end up with the Portland Trail Blazers. They had Greg Oden, Brandon Roy, and LaMarcus Aldridge. And for the bulk of their time together, both Roy and Oden were injured, and we never really got to see the ceiling of that potential big 3. So if you're the Nets, do Kevin Durant a favor. The Warriors, I'm not going to say they ruined his career, but they definitely set his career back a little bit by letting him play last season. So if you're the Nets, you have to look out for Kevin Durant. Do not let him play. The Achilles went once. and it would not be crazy to think it's going to go again, especially as a 7 seed when chances are you're not going to make a finals run to begin with. Thank you all for watching. If you're watching on Podbean, feel free to give me a follow. If you're watching on YouTube, you can subscribe. I obviously not going to be mad if you don't. You do what you want. But if you enjoyed this show, feel free to tune in Thursdays. That is when this gets posted. And really thank you for any support or views. It all means a lot. And like I said, tune in on Thursdays if you want to see more. Check out past videos if you want to see that. Thank you all for watching again, and make sure you have a nice day.